Chapter 10. The Library. When I opened the shades the following morning, the sky was clear. Pink clouds hung in a blue sky, full of sunlight and conviction. All signs of the previous day's rain were gone. But the memory of Roy Cummings ran through me like a streak of color in a rock. The softness in his eyes when I told him about my grandmother, the tender way he talked about his uncle, how he understood all too well the loss of a loved one. Leaning closer to the window screen, I saw that something was going on next door, at the Beacon Historical Society. Cars were parked up and down the street, and people were making their way, like a line of ants, to the door of the gray house. I breathed in the cool, salty air and watched a boy coast down the street on a bike, the ticking from the derailleur growing softer as he faded from view. What a perfect day for a ride, I thought, wishing I had a bike and wondering if there was a place where I could rent one. I imagined myself coasting down a winding country road, camera over my shoulder, no GPS to direct my wheels. And then I remembered it was Saturday, and I had an appointment to meet Lila Falk. Saturday? Oh God, the Men of Note dinner was last night, and I hadn't called Hayden yet. He was going to think I didn't even care. And there I was, daydreaming about bicycles and Roy Cummings. I grabbed my cell phone, yanking the charger cord from the wall along with it, and dashed into the bathroom. The screen said Hayden Croft. Missed call. I sat down on the toilet seat, my foot wiggling nervously as I played the message. Hey, Ellen, it's about 1:30 and I just got home. You really missed a great night. Everybody was asking for you. I think I did a good job with my acceptance speech. I think you would have been proud of me. I put my head in my hands and closed my eyes. I felt horrible. Of course, I would have been proud of him. And I was sure he'd done a great job with his speech. I could picture him standing at the podium, no note cards, just saying what was in his heart. Later, he would have shaken hands with the mayor, shared a humorous story. Hayden's cell phone went straight to voicemail when I dialed his number. I left a message, a breezy, happy message, sending my congratulations and telling him I couldn't wait to see him. I ended by giving him some kisses through the phone. I hung up, thinking how lucky I was to have Hayden in my life. Sweet, loyal, honest, the man every guy wanted as a friend. The guy every woman couldn't help but notice. Not to mention, he was a Croft, and he was marrying me. So what was my problem? Why had I woken up thinking about Roy Cummings? I was not interested in Roy. Not like that, anyway. I mean, he was nice enough once you got past the lawyer paranoia. And he was kind of charming in his own way, his own small-town, boyish way. And I had to admit he was good-looking. In fact, he was quite attractive. If I didn't know him, and I saw him walking down the street in the middle of Manhattan, I'm sure I'd ... I clutched my cell phone in my hand. I had to stop this. I was beginning to sound like I was attracted to him. I was engaged, I loved Hayden, I was getting married. There had to be a logical reason why I was having these odd feelings about Roy. They couldn't have sprung out of nowhere. I gazed at the print of the lighthouse on the bathroom wall and tried to sort it out the way I would analyze a legal issue, arranging and rearranging the pieces until they made sense. Me, Hayden, our wedding, Gran, Beacon, Roy, the dock, the antler. And after a while it dawned on me. I was getting married in 3 months. That meant I would soon be out of circulation. No more flirting, no more dating. I'd be a married woman. So wasn't it logical that I might want to feel I was still attractive to men? That I still had that power? Yes, of course it was. If I felt the tiniest spark or tingle for Roy, well, that was the reason why. I was just proving I still had it. Didn't that make sense? I twirled my engagement ring around my finger, breathing easily again. Of course it did. What's going on next door? I asked Paula as I grabbed a blueberry muffin and a glass of orange juice from the breakfast buffet. Paula replaced an empty pot of coffee with a full one. Annual picnic. It's a fundraiser. They have games, contests, auction things off. A coy smile appeared on her face. Last year, Troy Blanchard had the winning bid for a year's worth of manicures and pedicures from Sheer Magic. You know, the salon? I nodded. Yes, I've seen it. Said it was for his wife, Paula went on, her eyes crinkling in delight. But Poppy Norwich saw him in there one day, hand in the bowl of cuticle softener. She chuckled. Oh, we gave him such a hard time. I don't think he'll do that. Again? Asterisk, guess not, I said, tearing off a piece of the muffin and taking a bite. It was a little dry and didn't have nearly enough blueberries. Why call it a blueberry muffin if you can't even find the berries? Gran would have said. I took a long sip of my orange juice and thought about how she could teach these folks a thing or two. Paula set a stack of napkins on the table and turned to me. You ought to go next door if you want to learn about Beacon. They've got some nice things on display. Oh, really? I said, sure, historical stuff. And with your grandmother being from Beacon and all. My grandmother being from Beacon had... I told her about that. Most of the people at the picnic were already out back milling around, talking to friends, or watching their children in the egg toss or the three-legged race. I was happy to stay inside, where it was quiet. I strolled through the house, floorboards creaking as I walked from room to room. One room had a special exhibit of Carrier and Ives lithographs. In another, vintage sepia-tone photographs of downtown Beacon were on display. I was excited when I realized that many of the buildings in the photos still existed. Another room was filled with antique furniture, including a lovely settee, desk, and cherry highboy. In the last room, paintings by local artists were displayed. The oldest piece of a ship at sea dated back 250 years. There were quiet harbor scenes and scenes of girls wading in the ocean, holding their ballooning skirts. Above, the waves, and there were landscapes. Helds and forests and farms, with cows grazing lazily over mint-green hills. But the painting that stopped me, made my heart skip a beat, was one of a small, two-story shingled building, yellow with white trim around the windows. Red brick steps led to a blue front door, over which a sign read the Irresistible Blueberry Bakeshop and Calf. Pink roses climbed happily over a trellis to the right of the door, and through the windows customers could be seen sitting at little wooden tables. Ich knew the building. The outside was white now, not yellow, and the steps were wooden rather than brick, but I could tell it was the tailor shop downtown. I also knew the artist. I would have recognized the style anywhere, but the signature confirmed it. In the bottom right corner, my grandmother had signed her name. I moved in closer to the canvas and touched the frame, tracing my finger along its ornate carving. Then I touched the painting, the blue door, and the sign above it, imagining my grandmother's hand mixing the paints, creating the colors, brushing them onto the canvas. I couldn't believe I'd found another painting. 2 of them now. Beacon was sharing its secrets, and I was thrilled to be the recipient. I examined each section of the canvas, the way Gran had captured the detail in the weathered shingles, the reflection of the roses in the window pane, the burst of blue color. On the door, then I read the card on the wall, Blueberry Calf by Ruth Goddard. This painting won first place at the Beacon Festival of the Arts, 1950. The Beacon Festival of the Arts, first place. How fantastic. Gran had won the top honor. But what was the Beacon Festival of the Arts? And were there any other paintings? ID found 2. There could be more. There had to be. If Gran had painted this well, if she had won first prize in a contest, there had to be more. I flagged down a woman who had a volunteer sticker on her sweater and asked if they had more information about the painting or the artist. She was my grandmother, I said, pointing to the painting, astonished that the woman wasn't as excited as I was. Oh, you need to talk to Flynn, honey. Who is Flynn? Flynn Sweeney, she said. He's the director. He'll know. She walked me to the back door and pointed to a tall man with a bit of a Humpty Dumpty build and a bulbous nose. He was hovering over a long table. The sign in front said "Silent Auction." Dozens of items were on the table, including a large earthenware vase, a set of home repair instruction manuals, a crocheted blanket, fishing rods, boat cleats, a carton of previously viewed science fiction DVDs, and 8 drinking glasses with Donald Duck's face on them. I wondered. Sheer magic had donated the manicures and pedicures again. I introduced myself and told Flynn Sweeney about my grandmother's painting, the one of the irresistible blueberry, I said. "Oh, really?" He looked at me with deep brown eyes, the color aught pecan shells, and then moved a set of steak knives from one side of the table to the other, as if he were trying to decide where they looked best. "She painted that, did she?" "Yes. Her name was Ruth Goddard, and she grew up here," he asked as he cocked his head and stepped back to view the table from a distance. "Yes, she grew up in Beacon. That cafe was owned by the Chapman family," he said, finally leaving the steak knives on the right side next to a bicycle seat. "For years, one Chapman or another ran the thing, a sister or a brother or an uncle or somebody, until it finally closed. I think that was around." He paused. "Oh, maybe 20 years ago?" I nodded. "Well, I was wondering if you might have any more of my grandmother's paintings." "So far I know of." "Really too bad they closed," he said, moving a curling iron to the end of the table. "They made great blueberry muffins. Can't get a decent blueberry muffin anywhere these days." "No, you can't," I said. He had a point there. It's always unfortunate to lose a place that makes good food, I said. "Do you think you might have any more of her paintings? My grandmother's, I mean, Ruth Goddard. See, I'm from out of town, and I came up here to out-of-towner, are you?" I nodded. "Yes, well, that little cafe was a favorite of the tourists. People used to line up at the door in the morning to get the muffins when they came right out of the oven. You never had anything so good in your life, I can promise you that." "Yes," I said. "I'm sure of it. But do you have any other work by my grandmother?" He looked at me as though the question surprised him. "If we had other paintings by your grandmother," he said, picking up a milk glass jug, "they would be on display?" "What about records?" I asked. "Are there any records I could check for information about her? Do you have any archives?" He turned the jug over. "Don't know who donated this," he muttered. "Sticker fell off. Too bad." I waited while he inspected the jug. Finally, he glanced at me. "Single quotes? Oh yes, records." He scratched his chin. "Any information we have would be on the card by the painting? So that's everything?" I asked. "Just what's on the card?" "It said she won some kind of an art contest. The Beacon Festival of the Arts." "Ah, yes," he said. "That was something they held every year." He squinted at me. "Did you say she won the contest?" I nodded. Well then, you might try the library. Look at the old issues of the Beacon Bugle. Maybe they published something about it." "The Bugle. That was a great idea." "Yes, all right," I said. "Thanks for the suggestion. Just check the ones published in June, July, and August," Flynn said. "They used to hold that festival in the summer." He looked away, rubbing the jug as though it were Aladdin's lamp, and he hoped a genie might appear. "Summer," he said with a sigh. "That's when the blueberries were fresh." He was almost whispering now. "Those Chapmans, they could really make a muffin. You want to see a contest? They could win a baking contest any day of the week, any week of the month, any month of." I didn't hear what else he said. I scooted past the makeup mirror and the Partisi game and the silver picture frame with the dented corner, and I made a hasty exit. The Beacon Free Library was a large white colonial house surrounded by a picket fence and located on a side street several blocks from the center of town. A plaque over the front door read 1790. I followed a sign that took me to the checkout desk, located in a sunny room where several people sat reading at tables or in armchairs. A man with round glasses stood behind the front. "Okay, Molly, we'll let the fine go. Again. Just promise me you'll try to bring these back on time, all right? A dozen books on birdwatching lay on the counter in a tall stack. The librarian put them in a shopping bag and the woman ambled off. Then he turned to me. "And how can I help you?" He gave me a wary smile. "Do you have an overdue book fine you want to negotiate too?" "No," I assured him. "I'm looking for some old issues of the Beacon Bugle." "How old?" "Summer of 1950, I said. "I'm not sure which month." The man's black-rimmed glasses slid down his nose and he pushed them back up. "Oh, that old, I was afraid he was going to tell me they didn't have them." "Do your archives go back that far?" I asked. He hesitated and gave me a quick up-and-down glance. Then he said, "Yes, sure, but they're upstairs. I'll have to take you." He opened a drawer and removed a ring of keys. "Marge," he called to a woman attempting to squeeze a manila folder into an already overstood drawer. "I'm going to the archives. Be back in a minute?" He signaled for me to follow him, and we walked through rooms filled with books and a reading area with comfy-looking sofas and chairs. We walked up a flight of stairs bordered by a gleaming mahogany banister. On the second floor, he unlocked the door to a small room. Sunlight poured through a mullioned window, and dust motes floated in the air like tiny dancers. "All the old periodicals are here," the librarian said, pointing to the wooden bookcases around the perimeter of the room. He ran his hand down the shelves, stopping at a series of large books bound in maroon cloth. Pulling out a volume that had the dates June 1st, 1950, June 15th, 1950, embossed on its spine, he placed the book on a table in the center of the room. "Tid start here," he said. "And if you don't find what you're looking for, you can move on to these?" He indicated the 5 other books that housed the remainder of the summer issues. "These are all original newspapers," he said, his voice quiet now, as though just speaking of them gave him pause, "and they're very fragile." "Don't worry," I told him. "I'll be careful." He stared at me for a moment, and then, appearing to be satisfied, left the room. I opened the first of the 2 June volumes and was startled at how yellow and brittle the paper was. I ran my hand up and down the first page, amazed at the smooth feel of it. I began to turn the pages slowly, carefully, worried that I might damage or destroy them. This was Beacon's history I was staring at. I couldn't believe I was looking at an issue of the Beacon Bugle printed as I pored over the papers from that summer. I didn't expect there would be so many interesting things I'd want to read. I kept getting sidetracked. There was an article about the first kidney transplant, which took place in Chicago. The Korean War had just begun, and President Truman ordered the Air Force and the Navy into the conflict. The television show Your Hit Parade premiered on NBC, and the movie Annie Get Your Gun was in theaters. The ads and photos were amazing too. There were pictures of women in tailored suits with cinched waist jackets and pencil-slim skirts that fell well below the knee. Gray flannel suits seemed to be the big thing for men, and every man wore a hat. You could buy a house for $8,000 and a car for $1,700. I finally found what I was looking for in the August 15th, 1950 issue. The headline read, "High School Girl Wins Town Art Contest." There was a picture of Gran in a sweater, a long pleated skirt, and a pearl necklace. She stood next to an ease that held the painting. On the other side of the easel stood a man dressed in a suit and tie. He was holding a plaque. The picture looked as though it had been taken on Paget Street, right in the middle of town. I could see the seawall and ocean in the background, and part of the statue of the lady carrying the bucket of grapes. Ruth Goddard, 18, of Beacon, smiles as she accepts the award for first place at the annual Beacon Festival of the Arts. Ms. Goddard's painting, Blueberry, won the prize for Best in Show. Miss Goddard, who has been awarded a full scholarship from the Art Institute of Chicago, will begin college there next month. Congratulations to our winner, Art Institute of Chicago. I stared at the yellowed page. It was exactly what the man at Brewster's Camera World told me, that Gran had gotten a scholarship. But it didn't make sense. She talked about Stanford and she graduated from Stanford. She never said anything about the Art Institute of Chicago, not a word. Still, there it was, right in front of me. An uncomfortable feeling began to settle in my stomach, the feeling that there was much more to my grandmother than any of us knew. I read the article again and stared at the picture. Then I brought the book downstairs, put the page on the glass plate of the copy machine, and deposited my coins. The copier groaned and whined, and after a moment a piece of paper slid out and floated to the floor. I picked it up, gazed at the photo, and wondered, who was this girl?